Sebastian Archer, a man who built towers from promises and numbers, a millionaire who feared being known for anything softer than his balance sheet. Lucia Marin, 22, steady hands, a job that smelled of lemon and late shifts, a life stitched together from thrifted books and borrowed courage. Emilio Ruiz, Sebastian's chief of staff, a careful man with polished shoes and a sharper instinct for threats than for mercy. Listen close, because this beginning will pull at a corner of your heart, and the rest will tug until you cannot look away. The gala was the sort of occasion where chandeliers rehearsed their light, and small talk was practiced like a ritual. Sebastian moved through it like a lighthouse, directing attention with a tilt of his glass or the quiet insertion of a name into conversation. Outside, the harbor churned under a sky that had been gray all evening but had not yet let go. Lucia was at the edge of that world, balancing a tray as if it were a promise she could keep. She had taken the shift because the paycheck would cover rent and an overdue textbook, and because when she moved through rooms where chandeliers rehearsed their light, she could pretend for a breath that she belonged somewhere warm. She had not planned to be noticed. She had not planned to be handed a glass with a fingertip that left a ring of cold on her palm. She had not planned that a spilled glass would be the sort of accident that rearranged the entire night. It happened, fast. A client turned abruptly. A sleeve brushed Lucia's arm, and the amber drink arced onto Sebastian's tailored jacket. Time slowed for a moment. Conversations tucked themselves behind the clink of ice. 100 eyes sharpened into a single focus. Lucia felt the drop of warm liquid like a verdict on her skin. She made apologies. Fast. Too many, carrying the mild panic of someone used to shrinking, but the room's breath was held by the wrong person. Sebastian looked down at the stain, and then at the woman whose hands were trembling. Something in his face changed from annoyance to something precariously like curiosity. Instead of crushing her with a dismissal, Sebastian did something that surprised everyone and surprised himself. He told her to come to the veranda where the salt air would cool the heat of the moment. Lucia's first instinct was to run. Her second was to obey the voice that had the power to cut her future in two. She wrapped a napkin around the ruined cuff and stepped outside into a wind that smelled of rain. They talked awkwardly at first, voice rising and falling like people trying to negotiate a truce. Sebastian asked the sort of questions that were dangerous in their intimacy, because they assumed time he did not intend to give. And Lucia answered, with the economy of someone who had learned early how to keep edges from showing. When thunder finally tore the sky, the guests scattered, leaving the veranda nearly empty. The storm pinned the city under a sheet of white noise, and the world narrowed again to two figures and the feel of rain on a sleeve. The next movement between them was small and private, a hand that lingered just a beat too long while offering a towel, a laugh that cracked free like light through old glass. What neither of them named was the gulf between their lives. Sebastian's nights catalogued in deals and private jets, Lucia's days catalogued by bus routes and borrowed books. Neither addressed the risk except in the way their eyes refused to look away, when the lights flickered and then died, plunged the veranda into a hush trimmed only by the rain. Lucia felt the strange steadiness that comes right before something irreversible. Sebastian found a flashlight on his phone, and their faces were half hidden in its glow. It felt like a confession time where the stakes were softness. The kiss that followed was not a theatrical thing. It was not even a clear yes. It was a meeting of loneliness and curiosity, two people trying to see if the other might be a map out of isolation. Lucia left before dawn. She left with a paper cup of coffee in hand and a head full of reasons to not stay. She left because she had learned the hard way that people like Sebastian did not choose people like her. She left because the world had taught her to expect the worst whenever good things appeared wrapped in expensive paper. The morning found Sebastian staring at a jacket that had a faint crescent of dried stain, feeling the odd weight of a memory he could not dismiss. He thought, briefly and with anger, that she had used him. Then, with a shame that pushed the anger back, he found himself wanting to fix something he had helped break. The thought of the woman who had stood barefoot inside the hurricane of attention disturbed him like a splinter. Lucia moved cities that week, not because she had a plan, but because she had the impulse to start a ledger where previous debts could not be reread. She found work at a small community clinic by the water, where days had the honest rhythm of tending and leaving. She learned the names of old men who liked their tea warm, and of young mothers who came in with eyes that needed more than medicine. She learned to hold small hands through stitches and to steady breath during shots. In the quiet between tasks, she read at the window and taught herself to count the waves. Back in the towers, Sebastian found the absence of her single presence louder than the speeches of competitors. He made excuses to the clinic under the face of official philanthropy, donations, a projector here, a renovated wing there. At first, his staff thought it was a seasonal whim. Emilio watched him differently. Where others saw a distracted billionaire, Emilio saw a man whose appetite for certainty had been unsettled. He made a list of all possible dangers: press, scandal, rumor. Emilio bought images, monitored social whispers, and placed himself like a sentinel between Sebastian and whatever storm might arise. The first time Sebastian saw Lucia again, she was efficient at a counter, sleeves rolled up. Her hair gathered in a way that suggested she was always half cleaning something. The sight of her was at once a wound and a calling. She did not smile. She did not look away. For a long second they stood like two people on the wrong side of an old photograph, both familiar and strange. When she finally spoke, her voice held no accusation. It held something quieter, a request for distance. He tried to apologize and instead offered the kinds of gestures he knew: pledges, upgrades, money. She refused them gently. She wanted something neither of them could afford cheaply: normalcy. His presence there complicated everything. Rumors would grow like ivy if attended with the wrong kind of attention. She did not want to be the story of a night that a man with towers regretted. By the end of part 1, the weight of what had happened sat between them like an unopened letter. Sebastian believed that his world could buy back any wrong, but he was wrong about the cost. Lucia knew something else, that some wounds demanded time and tenderness, not apologies stamped in corporate font. Then came the moment no one expected. Lucia found a small line on a home pregnancy test that would change the equation entirely. She folded the result into a drawer and breathed until the room stopped tilting. Sebastian, without knowing the truth that had begun to pulse beneath Lucia's ribs, tightened his defenses and softened his nights. He returned to his penthouse and placed the jacket in a box as if it contained a fossil of a feeling. He didn't know that soon everything he thought he could control would be reorganized by a life he hadn't planned for. Stay with the story. The second part will pull at the seams of choices, of secrets that refuse to stay hidden, and of a question that will not be deferred any longer. The rain in Valencia fell differently, gentler, almost forgiving. Lucia had begun to love it because it muffled the noise of her thoughts. It had been 3 months since she arrived at the clinic, and her body had already started to whisper a secret she was not ready to share. The mornings brought nausea and fatigue, but she blamed the long shifts, the lack of sleep. In truth, she was terrified of what the truth would mean. When she first saw the faint pink line on that small plastic test, her knees gave way. She sat on the bathroom floor, cold tiles against her skin, her breath coming in shallow bursts. A child, his child. She could hear the faint echo of that night every time she closed her eyes. The storm, his touch, the taste of rain between their words. Lucia didn't know whether to call it a blessing or a sentence. She had no money, no family, no safety net. The only thing she had was her stubbornness, and even that felt fragile now. For days she said nothing. She continued working, helping patients, smiling when needed, pretending the life inside her wasn't rewriting her world. But every time she touched her stomach, she felt the pulse of something both fragile and fierce, a reminder that she was no longer alone. One morning, while organizing patient files, she overheard the doctors discussing a corporate visit. The name Sebastian Archer hit her like a sudden wave. She froze, the sound of the pen slipping from her fingers echoing louder than the voices. Her body knew the name before her mind could react. She could have run, asked for a day off, disappeared again. But she didn't. Part of her needed to see him one last time, to confirm that he still existed in the same world she once escaped from. The day came bright and warm. Sunlight spilled through the clinic windows as people rushed to prepare for the Millionaire's arrival. The staff was abuzz with excitement. "They say he's donating a new wing," one nurse whispered. "He could fund the whole city if he wanted." Lucia kept her head down, focusing on stacking boxes of supplies, hoping no one would notice her trembling hands. And then the air shifted. It always did when he entered a room. The quiet authority that followed him was impossible to miss. Sebastian walked beside his assistant and the head doctor, exchanging polite greetings, his expression calm but distracted. His eyes scanned the space, clinical white walls, the faint smell of disinfectant, the sound of children laughing in the waiting room, and then stopped. On her. Lucia turned, and for a heartbeat everything vanished, the chatter, the clatter of carts, even the sunlight. It was like staring at a ghost that had somehow remembered how to breathe. Sebastian's expression faltered for the first time in years. His world, so precise, so controlled, tilted. The woman he thought had disappeared forever stood before him in a nurse's uniform, her hair pulled back, her face softer but more guarded. Lucia's pulse thundered in her ears. She wanted to run, but her feet were rooted to the spot. She forced herself to nod politely, the gesture of a stranger, and turned back to her work. The rest of the visit passed in fragments. Sebastian asked questions he barely listened to. Lucia pretended not to feel his gaze following her. By the time he left, her heart was beating so hard she thought it might betray her secret. But he came back. The next day, then the next. Each visit with a new excuse, reviewing the renovation, meeting the board, checking the equipment. Lucia avoided him with a quiet desperation, slipping into side rooms, volunteering for night shifts. But avoidance is a fragile shield against a man who is both persistent and haunted. Finally, on a day heavy with rain, the inevitable happened. The last of the staff left early because of the weather. Lucia was closing up when the lights flickered, and she heard footsteps behind her. "You're avoiding me," Sebastian said softly. She didn't turn. "I'm working. You were avoiding me before that too." She exhaled slowly, gripping the counter. "What do you want, Sebastian?" He stepped closer, the faint scent of his cologne, wood and storm filling the small room. "Answers," he said simply. She turned then, anger flashing in her eyes. "You had your answers a year ago. You didn't come looking for me then." "I did," he said quietly, "but you disappeared." "Because I had to." Their eyes locked, and for the first time the distance between their worlds felt unbearably thin. "Tell me," he whispered, "why does it feel like I'm the one who's been running ever since that night?" Lucia's voice broke. "Because you can afford to run. I can't." Silence. The storm outside cracked open the sky. He stepped forward, but she backed away. "Lucia, please, don't." She pressed a trembling hand to her stomach, a reflex she didn't even notice until his eyes followed the movement. She froze. He saw it. The realization dawned on him slowly, terribly. His gaze shifted from her face to her trembling hands, and then to the faint swell that no oversized uniform could fully hide anymore. "You hid this from me?" His voice came out rough, low, almost pained. Lucia swallowed, every muscle in her body tightening. What was I supposed to do, Sebastian? Show up at your office and say, "Remember that night you regretted? Well, it left something behind?" What would you have done then? Send money? Call your lawyers? He stepped closer, eyes wide with something like disbelief. "Is it mine?" She laughed, but it was a brittle sound. "Do you think I've had time for anyone else?" The question shattered him. He reached out, but she flinched back. "Don't touch me," she said softly. "Please don't. You don't get to act surprised now. I built a life without you because I had to." Sebastian's voice broke through the quiet. "You think I wouldn't have taken responsibility?" "That's exactly what you would have done," Lucia said. "Out of guilt. Out of image. But not love. And I couldn't let that be my child's story." His face crumpled. The control he'd worn for years began to fracture. "Lucia, don't say sorry. Just let me be." She turned away, wiping her face with the back of her hand. "I can't," he said. "You have to." But he didn't move. The storm outside intensified, a low thunder echoing like a heartbeat between them. Sebastian's expression softened. Less pride now, more ache. "I know I can't change what happened, but I want to be here, not as the man who ruined your life, as the man who wants to make it right." She looked at him for a long time, her eyes full of exhaustion and defiance. Sometimes making it right means walking away. Then she did. She walked past him, through the flickering lights, her footsteps steady even as tears blurred her vision. Sebastian stood there, drenched in silence, feeling the weight of a truth too big for his world of numbers and rules. Outside, Lucia stopped by the gate and rested a hand over her stomach. Inside, Sebastian stood under the failing lights, whispering to no one. "You hid this from me, but I was the one who never saw." Neither knew it yet, but the storm had only just begun. the one that would either destroy them completely or bind them forever. And as the night settled over Valencia, two hearts beat to the same rhythm in different rooms, one of fear and one of awakening. Stay with the story, because part 3 is where everything changes, where pain becomes revelation, and where love learns the language of forgiveness. The morning after the storm, the world outside the clinic smelled of salt and rain, seagulls called above the water, and the sun began to carve gold out of the dark. Lucia hadn't slept. She sat at the edge of her narrow bed, hands folded over her stomach, feeling the slow, steady rhythm of a life that had chosen her. Her thoughts were a swirl of exhaustion and questions. Could she really raise this child alone? Would it always grow up with only half a story? Across the city, Sebastian hadn't gone back to Madrid. He had spent the night walking along the shoreline, shoes in hand, his reflection breaking in the waves. He had built his empire from precision, from predictability, yet here he was, completely undone by something he couldn't negotiate or measure. When the first light touched the water, he made a decision, not to fix things, not to claim control, but to try again as a man stripped of all titles. He arrived at the clinic just before noon. No driver, no suit, only a single sunflower in his hand, awkwardly wrapped in brown paper. Lucia was outside helping a patient into a car when she saw him. Her body tensed instantly, the old reflex of flight. But the look on his face stopped her. It wasn't arrogance or guilt this time. It was something quieter. Humility. "I know you said not to come," he began, voice calm, careful. "But there's something I need to tell you." Lucia crossed her arms, guarding herself. "Make it quick," he held out the sunflower. "This is for you. I didn't bring money. I didn't bring contracts, just this. Because it's the only thing that reminds me of light right now." She didn't take it, but her eyes softened a little. "Sebastian, what are you doing here?" He looked at her, really looked, and said, "Trying to learn how to stay." The words hung in the air. For someone like him, staying was harder than leaving. Lucia didn't know what to say. Part of her wanted to yell, to tell him that one flower wouldn't erase a year of silence. But another part of her, the tired part that had learned to survive by forgiving small things, wanted to believe him. They sat on a bench near the gate, silence stretching between them like the tide. "You were right," Sebastian said finally. "I would have handled everything like a transaction. That's what I was taught to do. But since you left, nothing has felt right. Not the business, not the people, not even the air I breathe. I didn't realize how much I had forgotten what it means to feel human." Lucia turned to him. "And what do you want from me now?" "Forgiveness." He shook his head. "No, I don't deserve that. I just want a chance to do one thing without destroying it." For a long moment she said nothing. Then she whispered, "You can't fix me or this with grand gestures, Sebastian. Love isn't about repairing, it's about showing up when it's hardest to." Her words cut through him like truth always does when it's spoken softly. He nodded, then said something she never expected. "Let me stay here. Let me work, help, volunteer. I'll sweep floors if I have to. I just want to be near the life I missed." Lucia almost laughed at the absurdity of a millionaire mopping hospital floors, but there was no irony in his eyes. He meant it. "This isn't your world," she said gently. "It could be," he replied, "if you'll let me try." And for reasons she couldn't explain, Lucia didn't say no. Weeks passed. Sebastian kept his word. He came to the clinic every day, helping with patients, fixing small things around the building, running errands. He wasn't perfect. He didn't know how to fold bandages or carry crates, but he learned. The staff was skeptical at first, whispering behind their masks, but eventually they saw him differently, not as a man of money, but as a man of effort. Lucia watched from a distance. She told herself she didn't trust him yet, that this was temporary, but one afternoon, she found him in the children's ward holding a baby who refused to stop crying. He was swaying gently, humming off-key, completely unaware that she was standing in the doorway. Her heart twisted. In that moment, she saw not the billionaire everyone feared, but a man capable of softness. Later that evening, when he walked her home, she said quietly, "You don't have to prove yourself to me." "I'm not," he said. "I'm trying to prove it to myself." The weeks turned into months. The baby grew inside her, stronger, steadier, and so did the fragile bridge between them. Sebastian learned to cook simple meals. Lucia learned to let him in without expecting perfection. They argued, they laughed. They shared long silences that no longer hurt. For the first time, she didn't feel alone. One evening, as the sun dipped low over the water, Sebastian asked, "Can I be there when it happens?" Lucia hesitated. "You mean the birth?" "Yes," she looked down, tracing circles on her belly. "If you stay, really stay, then yes." And he did. When the day came, it was chaos and light and pain all at once. Sebastian held her hand through every contraction, whispering words that didn't sound rehearsed or clever. When the first cry filled the room, he broke completely. Tears streamed down his face as he held the tiny bundle swaddled in white. "She's perfect," he whispered. Lucia looked at him, tired but smiling. "She's ours." He met her gaze, voice shaking. "You hid this from me," he said softly. "But now I understand why. You were protecting something pure." He pressed his forehead to hers. "And now I promise to protect you both with everything I am." Outside, the storm that had threatened the city earlier cleared, leaving a sky full of quiet stars. The clinic was asleep except for the soft hum of machines and the new rhythm of life that had just begun. Months later, Sebastian built a new branch of the clinic, not with his company's name but with Lucia's. Marin House, a sanctuary for mothers with no one else to turn to. People whispered about the millionaire who traded skyscrapers for kindness. Lucia never cared about the rumors. Every evening she watched him in the courtyard with their daughter, his laughter echoing off the white walls. She had learned something too, that love wasn't a grand declaration or a rescue. It was choosing each other every day in quiet, ordinary ways. One night, as they watched their little girl fall asleep, Lucia took his hand. "You know," she said, "I think we both needed saving." Sebastian smiled, eyes soft. "And somehow you taught me how." Lucia leaned her head on his shoulder. "No, we taught each other." The waves whispered against the shore. The night was calm. For the first time in both their lives, they weren't running anymore. They had found home. Not in a mansion or a fortune, but in the fragile, beautiful truth that had grown between them, and that perhaps was the real miracle, that two broken people could create something whole. The end.